Thank you, Andrew. And yeah, if our panel members could come up here and have a seat, we'll have to use Renee's comment, we'll have a fireside chat without the fire. We'll have them come up here, just give us a moment. And yes, I was told we have this panel and one more panel, and that's holding everybody up from lunch, so we will keep this on track. I don't think anybody will be opposed. Sit in the middle. So thank you to all these panel members here for joining us today. Given the amount of panelists that we have and the amount of time, we'll keep this a little bit condensed. And so I'll throw up a couple questions. This is meant to be kind of an organic conversation, meant to foster conversation. So if there's any questions, comments in here, interject at any time. I'll kind of throw up just the first one as a broad question and hope that somebody's going to latch onto it. But let's talk about the driving force on this. Andrew mentioned this was teased earlier today when we were talking about aerial application. But what is the driving force behind this? What is it about the market? What is it about the industry that is creating a demand or a desire to pursue the use of autonomous systems for aerial application? And that's open to anybody willing to bite.
I'll start that. Workforce.
Perfect.
We've talked a lot about that. But, if you look at aerial application, I happen to have been involved in the industry, manned industry, for over 40 years. But initially, aerial application, you talk about compaction, crop compaction, all the other aspects that aerial application provides for a grower that are pluses, besides the fact of timeliness, getting the chemical on, the efficacy, all those factors. So aerial application, whether it's manned or unmanned, would be basically a good asset for a grower.
Yeah, I would say to build on that, while we don't have exact data on this, I would say the average age of our aerial applicators is increasing by almost a year every year. And so we aren't seeing a whole lot of young people going into the industry, which creates a workforce problem, of course. Part of that is, it's a hardworking job. It's dirty. It's you're working when the weather's good, and everyone else wants to be at the river and at the lake, right? And so it's a little tougher to get young people to go into the industry, but with autonomy, I think we can help solve that problem.
Well, let's pull on that thread just a little bit. We've got workforce challenge on the aviation side, aeronautical side, but I've also heard earlier today that we also have a workforce concern on the agricultural side, right? So let's explore that a little bit. I mean, these two disciplines are kind of intersecting and creating this demand. How can this work together to solve problems of both industries?
The one question that I always get from growers and food producers that I talk to is about can we operate these airplanes from anywhere in the world, basically, because one of the issues is that lots of young people that get into the industry don't necessarily want to be on the farm all the time. They want to be at home, they want to live in larger cities, and so helping them or making our product capable of allowing them to work from different places and efficiently operate multiple airplanes at the same time, I understand is always a big benefit to them. The other thing I wanted to add to that is ultimately what it comes down to, labor is important, but every farmer that I talk to says to me, what's my cost benefit? How do I drive down my prices because I need to be competitive on a global scale? And it starts with not necessarily the fact that you're taking the pilot out of the airplane, because the drone pilots that are going to operate our airplanes are equally as expensive or equally as skilled and therefore in-demand labor force to operate them, but also driving down costs of insurance because all of a sudden you have an automated airplane, so the insurance arguably should be lower. You don't have fuel costs and so on. And in addition to all of that, with a more precise application, we, in the trials that we are conducting, we show that we are capable of driving down the actual usage of chemicals, which is a big advantage to the farmers. Long-winded answer to your question, but I hope that works.
No, that is great. Appreciate that answer. And so let's bring it over to Eric, Great Lakes Regional Administrator out of Chicago office, right?
That's right. Yep.
And so I had the honor of being on a panel at what was it? What conference were we just at?
At the FAA Drone Symposium?
That's what it was,
Yeah.
FAA Drone Symposium, talking about all these opportunities as well as the Advanced Air Mobility panel or symposium as well, which was great. And one of the threads I want to pull on is what, we're going to say FAA at a broad level, but very specifically the regional administrator office that covers this region in North Dakota. What are the regulatory factors or the community factors that your office has to consider when it comes to enabling aerial applications by autonomous systems?
So I think, first of all, a little bit of foundational information on what is a regional administrator from the FAA. I mean, it's pretty clear that we've got a robust infrastructure set up in Washington, D.C., but like a lot of federal agencies, the FAA is divided up into regions. And we have regional administrators, 9 of them total. I'm one of 9 that are across the country with different geographic areas. And they stretch all the way out to the Pacific Islands, as a matter of fact, where we have some U.S. territories. And that was my previous assignment out in Western Pacific before I came to Great Lakes. But we're basically the FAA's administrator's executive representative within the region. So I have Great Lakes and includes most of the Great Lakes states as well as the Dakotas. And our role is really, we are the lead for outreach and engagement, not only with the public, but also with the local community, tribal, state, and local governments. And where we fit into this process is we are sort of the storefront for problem solving. So if you are looking to get something addressed, whether it's aircraft noise or aviation noise, or you want to do a startup company that's aviation related, or you need to be connected with a flight standards district office, or you want to have a tour of the tower for STEM or AVSED for educational purposes, we're the ones that can help facilitate that. For agriculture specifically, and I was talking with one of my staff, Nitin Rao here. Some of you may have met Nitin previously, and feel free to pepper him with questions later if you have any. But one of the things that we do in Great Lakes is we noted that we've got the most agricultural land in all of the regions, we believe. Now, Alaska by itself, that's one region for the FAA, has more square area rather, but we believe we have more agriculture. So we are in a unique position here within Great Lakes to help facilitate all of the Part 137 operators getting up and using drones for agricultural purposes.
Thank you for that, Eric, and appreciate that perspective and insight as to what the Regional Administrative Office does for this industry. I'm going to kick it over to Lucas here. Would you mind providing your perspective as a sprayer, your particular business, and more importantly, what are the factors you have to consider? You are competing with the traditional way of doing things, right? With traditional aviation technology that has been tried and true, but this is a new field. So tell us a little bit about those battles and what does it mean to break ground and move forward?
Sure. Yeah, so probably initially 3 years ago when this thing, drone spraying in agriculture kind of surfaced as like, this is a reality. I mean, it could even be 5 years now. Some of the original players were out there. That was the main view of a lot of aerial application companies. But as was stated here already, the growing labor, our labor force average age is growing every single year. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the numbers up to the average age is 58. And so we have a pretty big issue there. So initially it was, hey, these things are going to come in and take our jobs, but I think it's been pretty easy for us to start to come up with a better way to frame that. So we're not concerned anymore about replacing. In fact, I mean, there's, when you start to consider like agronomically the best time to spray, to cover the crop, everybody faces huge challenges. And so in the industry, what's called the corn run is big fungicide, insecticide run that happens in the Midwest from the Dakotas, all the way to Missouri, kind of in the big main area where corn and soybean is grown, and we pull pilots from all over the world to come fly that. So in those aspects, there's a lot of room for opportunity to help get the timing better. And then in terms of safety, drones would be really great. So trying to optimize the best place to put a drone versus a manned pilot is kind of a win-win, because in the end it would be more safe, and then the pilot, in effect of that, would have better acres to cover, therefore they would make more money, and we would lose less pilots, which is a big problem too. So yeah, early on some of the challenges were that, and so I think it scared a lot of people away from going after some of the more aggressive technologies that were out there in this space. Luckily we stayed on top and true, because a lot of them were really just way too big. That'll never get improved in the US airspace. That's too large. You can't be flying that around. And so those companies had to go to other countries to perfect what they were working on. And now that they're able to come back in the US, it puts kind of us and them in a really good spot to be able to experience that technology firsthand and help drive it for the US as a whole.
Thank you, Lucas. Appreciate that. And Eric, I wasn't sure if you're queuing up for something or if you, no?
I'm always ready, but nothing yet.
Well, I actually have a question for Mike with Aeronautics Commission of North Dakota. Playing a little bit more on the workforce issue, just to re-highlight, agriculture industry, we don't have a workforce lining up with the younger generation to jump into this. We don't have that happening on the aviation side as well, just because of the training requirements to get into this field. What are some things that aeronautics is doing kind of at a state level to help do outreach and build that next generation of what will be our workforce, helping to enable this environment?
Yeah, good question, thanks. So specifically on the outreach side of things, we've done a really good job in the last few years. Well, first of all, my title's education coordinator at the commission, so we've dedicated staff to education and facilitating outreach. And so that said, we currently, in our high school systems around the state, we have 7 face-to-face high school aviation programs. So not specifically ag, but we're starting to try to get those integrated into ag programs as well. So like UAS programs embedded into ag programs and embedded into others as well, but embedded into ag programs is one of the natural fits. In addition to those face-to-face programs, we do have 2 different types of distance ed opportunities. One is the Center for Distance Ed, which is more of an online type of program, and the Central Region Area Career and Tech Center offers virtual instruction, a little more hands-on and a little more robust. So really every student in the state has aviation available, and we're trying to make the licensing for those teachers to be able to teach it in other curriculum areas easier. So we're trying to embed it. In addition to that, for instance, next month we have a career expo. We started doing those about 4 years ago here. And so we're bringing students who are interested in aviation. We use our Air Museum, so this one will be in Minot at the Dakota Territory Air Museum. Bring them in and expose them to all the different career fields in aviation. So, okay, you thought you wanted to be a pilot. Did you know there's 30 different types of pilots, just here in North Dakota, and expose them to all these different areas. And so we want UAS to play a role in that. We want those operators to be there. But we bring in engineering and different types of pilots, static displays of aircraft, that sort of thing. So, so that's some of the ways, I guess, on the outreach side that we're addressing it.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. And next one here for Volker with PICA, and congratulations on the recent approval from the FAA. I think that's a really significant milestone. And as somebody from that, as a test site, we get to see a lot of different systems come up for approval. I recognize the achievement that is. And if you would be able to give us some insight on what do you think is the next big barrier that OEMs like yourself face as we continue to innovate in this sector? What is that big barrier that we have to overcome? Is it the regulatory barriers? Is it a funding barrier? You're probably going to say yes to all that, but in your opinion, what is that number one thing we need to focus on?
Yes to all of that. Funding, actually, before I joined PICA, I was in the commercial aviation industry, and I had sort of a rudimentary understanding of what the drone world is all about. And I spoke to a few friends, and I said, so what does it take to get a new aircraft program approved and certified by the FAA? And the answer was 7 years and $700 million. And that's certainly true for commercial airplanes. We mentioned it this morning, we've raised just around $50–60 million so far and have a good runway ahead of us, so we've been able to do that with a lot less. But it is, so funding I don't necessarily see so much as a problem today. The venture capital market is interested in those companies that are successful and showing progress, so we'll find out when we go through our next fundraising round how quickly we're going to, and how successfully we're going to be able to do that. I do think the biggest hurdle is the regulatory side, and we handed in our application to the FAA 3 years ago. It took a while to get the approval, but for good reason. The FAA is there to ensure safety. So there has to be a diligence applied to approval processes, and that's why things take a little bit longer. And you know, it's the largest airspace market in the world, which is why we've pivoted for a period of time to Central America and trying to work there. I see that as the regulatory side in general. The technology is advancing so fast, and the regulators can't keep up with it, understandably so. So for us, when I look at commercializing the airplanes, the products that we have in the US, both on the ag side as well as on the cargo side, getting to systems or airspace integration with BVLOS approvals, that's the big one for us. And I think that's where the next hurdle is for us.
3 years. That's pretty quick. You know, it's important to know that the way the FAA was structured and the way we were originally set up was not to certify drones or air taxis. If you were an engineer and you worked in the aircraft certification service within the FAA, you might work on 1, maybe 2 aircraft in a 30-year career. Think about that. So now, drones whose life cycle is measured in terms of months challenges us to think about things in a different way and to accept and mitigate risk in a much different way. And it's really encouraging what I see now and the stance that the FAA has. And prior to being a regional administrator, I was in the UAS integration office for 10 years. And to see us fight through the challenges with the Department of Defense, to fight through the challenges and get the test sites set up and operational and running, to see the research and development expand, and now to see, fast forward to all the other activities, and to see the change in the way the exemptions have been processed for low-risk agricultural operations. It's pretty exciting. Just for perspective, from 2015 until earlier this year, 178 agricultural approvals, 178, 2015 to 2023. In the last 2 months, that number has jumped to over 500 in 2 months. So those cultural changes, that adoption and understanding of the risk factors, and the way we partnered with industry, academia, local and state governments will continue to move forward with companies like PICA and others that come to the FAA with new and novel concepts. And I think it's really, I always say this when I get a chance to talk about it, this is the most exciting time, but like 2 months later I'm speaking, I'm like, this is the most exciting time. And it really is for agriculture. We're right on the edge of something even more amazing than what it is today.
And I just want to add, the 3 years was not a criticism because I, as I said, I was in commercial aviation. I know, about the MAX disaster and all the other things. So there is a reason why the FAA needs to be diligent. And we're happy to have the approval now. We're going to move along, and hopefully we're going to get our next one as soon as we can, as soon as you can.
I saw your presentation earlier, and I'm looking forward to learning more.
As am I. I'll do one more question and maybe one more generic question. This one's going to be to Cindy. And with your rich history and background, you're a member of the legislature in North Dakota. You yourself are a professional in this business. You've got a really unique perspective. North Dakota's really been in the lead in this space. Might be biased when I say that, but we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of the test site program, of which you as a member of the legislature have helped enable. But our history in UAS goes back even farther than that. Inevitably, this is starting to grow and gather attention across the U.S. And what advice would you give to somebody who maybe isn't from North Dakota, but what can they learn from what we've done here, whether it be from a legislative perspective or a professional perspective or some hybrid of both?
See what I can do here. I did serve on the team that brought the test site to North Dakota. But we were successful in doing that, I think, because everybody was on the same page, whether you were in the ag spraying business, whether you were running a commercial operation, whatever aspect of aviation that you were in within the state perspective, we were all on the same page. And that made a huge difference. And that makes a huge difference legislatively. From a legislative perspective, I always say, you know, check with the enemy. Because if you bring a bill forward or any of that and you have a lot of naysayers, you're not going to be very successful. And legislatively, I find, I'm talking a state perspective, sometimes it's reactionary versus let's lead into this with an educational aspect and a trustworthy educational aspect. As we change and our legislators change, our lobbyists are there and we get hit often by the lobbyists, but we want a trustworthy lobbyist, but we also need to take it upon ourselves to be educated and data-driven. And sometimes that's very difficult in the legislative body to be data-driven. Things happen fast, but sometimes I think in this perspective we need to slow down just a little bit. But when you look at overall legislation, from a state perspective, we have the State Aeronautics Commission, we have the Department of Agriculture, which functions with the Extension Service, so we have very little. We can make regulation or make laws, but really we turn to the feds because they have the airspace. So, and I look at aviation in general and specifically right now manned spraying. I mean, we have so many gods to answer to in that industry. The feds, some of the state, EPA. So it's a very broad perspective, but most of it comes, I would say, federally versus state. And if we can just keep back and not be reactive and be educated, I think we're going to do a lot better. And there's no reason to make laws just to make laws. So that's kind of my 5 cents. Thank you.
Great perspective. All right, toss-up question, and then we'll end it here and hand it back over. So this is really for anybody. I'm going to build off of Eric's comment just a little bit of, you know, the last 8 years, we've seen, you know, in the last 2 months, an exponential increase in approvals. And if that's in 2 months, and in 2 months from now, you're going to say that's the best time, what does this look like 5 to 10 years from now? Open for anybody.
I don't know who's going to know the streamlined process, but I hope you do.
Well, look, I mean, Jeffrey Vincent talked about some of our regulatory activities going forward. And we all know that beyond visual line of sight operations, routine BVLOS flights is really the thing that everybody's waiting for, or many folks are waiting for, to be able to flip the script and look at monetizing the operations in a much more productive way. And what I mean by productive is versus doing the exemption basis, right? So if you have a regular rule that you can operate to, you know how to design and build and do your operation based on that, then that takes a lot of the guesswork out of that. When you take guesswork out, that takes out time. When you take out time, you save money. And so to get to that point, 5 years, it better be less than 5 years, but to get to that point, I think will really unleash the industry, not only for agriculture, but in a lot of other drone operations, and there will be implications that, that fold into AAM or air taxi operations as well.
Thank you very much for that. Let's give our panel members a round of applause here, and then we'll hand it back over to Andrew.